August 23rd, 2020. So they had me scheduled here, 14, about 6 years later. And this was August 23rd, 2020, COVID. And I had, from the middle of March to the fall, I had 54 concerts postponed. This was one of them. So this was not the only one. I had 54 postponed because of COVID. And over the next couple of years, I've made up all these concerts, and this is the last one. Of those 54 concerts, no. So that's why, and the reason it's significant is because in 2020, it was the 250th anniversary of the birth of Beethoven. He was born in 1770, and 2020 was 250th year. And there was estimated to be, get this, 1,000 concerts a day worldwide dedicated to Beethoven. I was giving 167 of them, but that's 360,000 concerts, and COVID wiped it out. I mean, many of those concerts. So, my point is that over the last 29 months, I've been doing concerts and making up concerts from COVID, and 1 month ago, tomorrow will be 1 month ago, December 16th, is Beethoven's birthday. And I was scheduled to give a concert on December 16th, 2020, on his 250th birthday, in his home city of Bonn, Germany, 1 block from the house he was born in. And it was postponed for 2 years, and this past December, I did it. I was in Bonn, Germany, on December 16th. Tomorrow will be 1 month since I was there, and it was unbelievable. I went to his house where he was born in the morning. I went throughout the city. There were places where Beethoven played when he was 10 years old, 12 years old, 14 years old. The huge monument dedicated to Beethoven from Bonn, Germany, in Bonn. And then that night, 1 block from his house where he was born, I gave a concert. So this is significant because this is the last concert of this all Beethoven that started actually in 2019. I started doing all these concerts. So I'm thankful to Pastor Kirby. He was patient, I was patient, the Lord was patient, and we're here. So how's that? Good? So, we can give a hand. So you're going to hear what they heard a month ago in Bonn, Germany. You're going to hear this music. So, it's all Beethoven. Beethoven is now 252 and 29 days. How's that, right? Because he was born in 2020 was 250, so it was 252 last month, but he's 29 days. So, you all have a program. So in your folder, there is a program that's specifically a white program, right, that says program. So I'm going to refer to that program. We ran it off today. I brought it down, and so it's very important you look at that. I'm going to play these 3 major pieces by Beethoven, share about myself, and then the final piece is very short, and the program is an hour and a half. So you know how long we're here. We're done around 6:30. So, the first piece on the program is the first piece Beethoven ever wrote for the piano. He was 25 years old. He was a great pianist. He'd given concerts of other composers, and now this was his first piece. It's in 4 parts, you'll see. Allegro means lively. Adagio is very slow, very beautiful, very profound. The 3rd part is a little dance, minuet, and the 4th part is very fast. But this is what's significant. When Beethoven played this piece, in one night, in 15 minutes, music changed forever. One night, one piece, this piece. Because nobody ever played music this dramatic or intense. This shocked people. This is Beethoven grabbing your throat. Music was entertainment. It was background music. Beethoven said, my music is not entertainment. It is the power of the human soul. So, look for a moment who it's dedicated to. It's dedicated to a man named Franz Joseph Haydn. You see that? Haydn was a very great composer. He was 24 years older than Beethoven, and he taught Beethoven. For a while, he was the teacher of Beethoven. And so he thanks Haydn, saying, you have guided me, you've helped me, and I thank you, and I dedicate this piece to you. It was an acknowledgement. It was a very positive thing for Beethoven to dedicate his piece to the great Haydn. So this is the first piece for the piano in 4 parts by Beethoven. So, 18 months after Beethoven played this piece, something happened to Beethoven that would change his life forever. And that is, he began to go deaf. He began to lose his hearing. He had ringing in his right ear, and then he had ringing in his left ear. And he went to see some doctors who basically gave him some horns to funnel the sound. But then over the next 5 years, he began this slow descent into losing his hearing completely. At one point, the ringing went away, and he thought, oh good, I'm being cured, but the ringing was going away because his hearing was going away. So 80% of Beethoven's music that he wrote, he couldn't hear a note of it. He could not hear a note. Some of the greatest music your ears will ever hear was written by the man who couldn't hear it himself. So I've been asked for 50 years, how does a man write music if he can't hear it? And the answer is that you do not need to hear music with your ears to hear music in your head. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to sing for you. I'm going to sing. You don't sing. I sing. I'm going to sing for you the Star Spangled Banner. Okay? Oh, Jose. Do you hear the Star Spangled Banner? You do. You do. Right now, let's all listen to Happy Birthday. I hear Happy Birthday. So you see, the point is, you don't need to hear music with your ears to hear music in your head. But this is the big difference. You know the Star Spangled Banner or Happy Birthday because you've heard the Star Spangled Banner. Beethoven heard music that nobody ever heard. And I have a book called Beethoven in His Own Words, which has excerpts from letters he wrote and a diary that he kept. And a man wrote to him and he says, where do you get the musical ideas in your mind? And he said, the music that I have has been given to me by the Almighty God. And I am just putting it down on paper for him. Now you have to understand, that's a very humble statement. God has given me this music, and I'm taking some ink and a white piece of paper, putting some dots and dashes on it, and 250 years later, Sam Rotman hears it, and I'm weeping uncontrollably because it's so beautiful. So I share all of this because the next piece on your program, look at that. The first piece you heard was Sonata number 1. Do you see that? The next piece is Sonata number 8. And I share this because this next piece Beethoven wrote while he was losing his hearing. This was in the middle of this turmoil. And it's called the Pathétique. The word pathos is a Greek word which means suffering. It literally means, it doesn't mean your emotions. It means suffering. That's where we actually get the Greek word, the pathos de Christus, the suffering of Christ, that we have in Passion Week. It's the suffering of Jesus Christ. And Beethoven was going through suffering. He's lost almost all of his hearing. He sees there's maybe no remedy. And so in the very beginning you have these chords, and the only word to describe it is a German word called Angst. I speak German. Angst is internal suffering. You'll hear it. The piece gets very fast, and it's very agitated. And when you see my right hand going over my left hand, I think most of you will be able to see that. When you see my right hand, this is Beethoven talking to himself. Imagine over a 5-year period how many conversations Beethoven had with himself about this dilemma. So the first part is this very slow moments of this angst, this pain, and then this agitation and talking to himself. The second movement you would think would be very, very tumultuous, very sad, and it's absolutely the opposite. It is absolute tranquility and peace and acceptance. Beethoven says, this is what is mine to be. This is what the Almighty has given to me, and I will accept it. I will not fight it. I will not mourn over it. Some people think it's the most beautiful piece Beethoven ever wrote. When I play it, I almost try not to breathe. I mean, I breathe. It's 6 minutes long. So, but it is so pure emotionally. So pure emotionally. It's absolutely magical. The third part is fast again, very anxious. And at the end of the piece, Beethoven is hitting the piano with his fist. Now, it's not literally his fist, but you'll hear these chords in my left hand of this pounding at the end. And it's Beethoven, he wants to hear something from the piano, and he can't hear anything. He hits it, and he can't hear it. Now, notice who it's dedicated to. It's dedicated to a man named Prince Karl von Lichnowsky. This was a Polish man. He was a prince. He was wealthy. He was a nobleman. He had a palace in Vienna, Austria, where Beethoven was. And every Friday, he put on a big concert. This was very famous for decades. The Friday concert at Prince Lichnowsky's palace. And if you were anybody in Vienna, you came to these concerts. And if you were anybody as a composer, you were on this program. And you know who was on every Friday's program? Beethoven. And so he thanks him because he said, you are the one that I was given the opportunity to share my music with the people of Vienna and of Austria and Europe. When Beethoven died in 1827 at the age of 56, he was purported to be, this may sound strange, but it's true. I've read it on a number of documents. He was purported to be the most famous man in all of Europe. That's quite a statement. 20,000 people traveled from Paris, Prague, London. They traveled, 20,000 traveled by horse and buggy, by the way, and boat, to the funeral of Beethoven when he died. They had to delay the funeral because they knew so many people were coming to Vienna for his funeral, 20,000 people who came outside to this funeral. So this is a very special piece to Beethoven, of course, the Pathetique, very famous piece. The painful, the first movement, the very tranquil, amazing second movement, and then the very fast and intense third movement, the Pathetique by Beethoven. So, Beethoven ended up writing 32 pieces like this, 32 sonatas. It's 855 pages of piano music. Look what it did to me. I put in all those notes of Beethoven, and the hair said there's not room for both of us, so we're out of here. So Beethoven wrote 32 sonatas. You heard number 1, you heard number 8, and the next one is number 26. Many, many years later, decades later, Beethoven is very famous, he's very successful, he's a legend. He's a legend. He's the only composer that probably became what he deserved while he was still alive, meaning they realized who he was. This Beethoven is Beethoven. Where Mozart and other people died in obscurity, and then after they died, they realized what a talent they were, not Beethoven. He was very adulated. And so, the secret of the piece, of this next piece, is who it's dedicated to. So if you look at it, it's dedicated to a man named the Archduke Rudolf Rainer. The Archduke Rudolf Rainer was the youngest son of the Emperor of Austria. So I always made this example, but I have to change it now. Everybody knows Queen Elizabeth II, right? She passed away about 5 months ago or 3 months ago. And her son was Prince Charles, who's now the king. So this is like the Prince Charles to Queen Elizabeth. This is the son of the emperor. So he is known as the Archduke. And he loved classical music, and he saw that Beethoven was Beethoven. And this is what he said to Beethoven. Beethoven, you write music, and I'll pay all your bills. It's very simple. Don't teach. Don't go to university to teach. Beethoven was invited to be the music director of a city in Germany. So Beethoven was from Germany, Bonn, Germany. He was German. He came to Vienna because that was the sort of the epicenter of classical music with Mozart, Schubert, Haydn, these monumental composers. And he was invited to go back to Germany to be the music director of a whole city. And he was thinking about it. He said, no, you're just going to push papers. You write music. And Beethoven became Beethoven because of this one man. This one man. 14 of the greatest pieces Beethoven ever wrote are dedicated to him. Now, Beethoven only dedicated one piece to Haydn. You heard it. Beethoven dedicated 14 of his greatest pieces to this man, the Archduke. And so, he was very close to him, a very good friend of his. In May of 1809, a man named Napoleon, you've heard of Napoleon? He is the Emperor of France, and he invades Austria. And for security reasons, the Emperor of Austria, his name was Leopold II, he decides to take his family and his government out of Vienna for security reasons. And Beethoven pleads with the Archduke, who's a family member, please don't leave me alone, please don't leave me alone. And so this piece is called, if you look at it, the Farewell Sonata. You see the word farewell? The first word, farewell. And farewell means to say goodbye. So I speak German. There's two ways to say goodbye in German. 99.9% of the time you say the word Auf Wiedersehen. And Auf Wiedersehen literally means what it says. Auf means after. Wieder, again. Sehen is to see you. After, again, I'll see you. So that's going to happen. I'll see you later. Bye. The word Lebewohl is used when you never expect to see the person again. It's a final goodbye. In fact, in German culture, it is known that when someone's on their deathbed, you come and say your Lebewohl, your final goodbye. And Beethoven was convinced he'll never see the Archduke again. This will be a final goodbye. Now you may say, well, of course he didn't want him to leave. He was paying all of his bills. Not for 10 years. Not for 10 years. Beethoven was so successful now. Again, this is decades later, number 26. Beethoven said to the Archduke, I don't need your financial help, I need your friendship. So he didn't need to give him any more money or support him. And this man helped Beethoven through a lot of difficulties. His deafness, people talking about him, some of the paranoia of Beethoven, imagining what people were saying about him. He helped him through a lot of crises. And so he says farewell. And on the first three notes of the piece, Beethoven does something he never did in any piece of his music. He actually writes out the word Lebewohl. wohl, fare thee well, on the first three notes. I don't sing them, you don't say them, it's just those three notes represent the farewell. And so the piece gets fast, my right hand is Beethoven, my left hand is the Archduke, and they're yelling at each other. I mean, they're arguing. Beethoven says something, he answers. He says something, he answers. And so this is, throughout the first part, you'll hear these three notes. Sometimes it's in my right hand, sometimes in the left hand, sometimes they overlap. But these three notes is this farewell. At the end of the first part, you can actually hear the horses taking the carriage out of Vienna with the Archduke in it. And the right hand goes to the top of the piano, my left hand goes to the bottom of the piano, and Beethoven writes a physical separation, a musical separation, and an emotional separation. It's absolutely magical. The second part, if you notice, is called the absence, and Beethoven wrote this piece while he was gone. This was in the summer of 1809, excuse me, 1809. And you know, I mentioned my right hand is Beethoven, and twice during the second part, you'll hear only my right hand playing. This is Beethoven all by himself. January 30th, 1810, 9 months later, the Archduke came back to Vienna. And I'll tell you, you'll hear it. Beethoven explodes with about 2,000 notes in 20 seconds. I mean, it is amazing. He just explodes, and you can see him running to each other and embracing each other and talking. You know, Beethoven would answer, and the Archduke would write out things because Beethoven couldn't read lips, but he would write out things, and Beethoven, I mean, it's absolutely exuberant. And it's called, look, the movement is called Das Lebewohl. Das Lebewohl means, is, yes, I have seen him again. Yes, I have seen him again. So there's something very interesting about this last part. I can just share this with you. My father was born in Romania, and my mother was born in Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia. They were from Eastern Europe. And they came to the United States in 1950. That's the year I was born. And I remember my parents had a lot of friends from Russia, from Hungary, from Romania. And they would take walks with them in the park or in a mall. And there would be another couple. So my father would walk with his male friend, the husband, and then my mother would walk with her female friend, the wife. So it was two couples, my mother and father and their friend and the wife. And they would not hold hands, they would hold each other, they would embrace like this. They would lock arms together. And I remember walking up, they would walk like this. And I always would, that always seemed a little strange. I mean, you could walk like this a little bit, put your hand in, but they actually do this. And it was not until I went to Europe in 1973 for a Beethoven competition in Vienna that I actually saw this. Here were people in Vienna walking just like I imagined my parents. And twice in this third part, you can see the Archduke and Beethoven actually locking arms and walking together as they're talking and chattering. It is said that Beethoven, after he saw the Archduke, he came home. Now, he already wrote the first two parts, right? The farewell and the absence. He came home, and in one sitting, he composed this third part. In one sitting. He didn't get up from the piano until he completely composed it. Now, that's unbelievable, because Beethoven would take sometimes weeks to work on a piece. He would erase it. He would rework it. He gave labor to every piece. Beethoven is the only composer that every note he wrote is still being played today. He's the only composer. Mozart wrote 600 pieces. You know how many are played? 80. Now they're grade 80. Oh, they're grade 80. But 520 pieces you'll never hear by Mozart because it was background music or entertainment for political people or for nobility. Beethoven said, no, I don't write that way. So Beethoven came home. He would he would work on it until it was absolutely perfect. He sat down and he didn't get up until he completely composed this third part. I believe it. It was documented by a good friend of his who came upon him while he was doing it, and he expressed it, and he sat outside and waited to hear this, and he heard him composing the whole piece and realized that he had done it in that one sitting. Ferdinand Ries, a very good musician friend of Beethoven. So, it's dedicated to the Archduke, the farewell, the absence, the return. After that, I'll share my story, and the last piece is very short. sugar. Well, before I play the last piece is very short, 5 minutes long. I'd like to share just a couple of minutes about myself, as I had the other times I was here. And my story, very briefly, begins with my parents. As I mentioned, my father was born in Romania in Eastern Europe in 1905. My mother was born in Eastern Europe. At that time, the country was called Czechoslovakia, and she was born there in 1915. So my parents were 10 years difference in age. And they were both very religious, Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the strictest Jews. They really are very serious to follow all the laws that God gave through Moses in what's called the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of Moses. And my parents left Europe in 1940 because of one person, and his name was Adolf Hitler. If my parents stayed in Europe, they both would have been murdered, 1,000%. My father was 35 in 1940, my mother was 25. They would have been sent to a concentration camp and murdered at the gas chamber, or they would have been sent to a labor camp, and in a labor camp, once you got sick, they just killed you, they shot you, because there was no time for you to get better. 11 months after my parents left, my father left Romania, the Nazis came to his town. They gathered 10,000 Jews together that was in the region, and over the next 2 weeks, they murdered all 10,000. And 2 of them were my grandparents, my father's parents. My father had a sister that was taken to a concentration camp and never heard from again. So like a lot of Jews, they had to get out of Europe. And like a lot of Jews, they ended up in South America. There were a few countries in South America that had an immigration for Jews because they'd heard, they didn't know exactly, but they'd heard of this dilemma in Europe. And they ended up in a small country right on the equator called Ecuador. In the capital, Quito, Ecuador. They lived there from 1940 to 1950. My sister was, actually my brother was born there, he's the oldest. My sister was born there. And my mother was pregnant with me in the spring of 1950. My father filled out paperwork to bring his family to the United States. He got permission. They came through New York City, and I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. And I was raised in a very, very religious Jewish home. My grandparents died for being Jewish. My parents suffered for being Jewish, and I was instilled with all about my Jewish heritage. My parents sent me to public school during the day, and then I went to school in the synagogue. The synagogue is where Jewish people worship. And I went to the school called Hebrew school. There's not a lot of these Hebrew schools. There's Catholic schools, Protestant schools, but there's some synagogues. Our synagogue had a very big Hebrew school. And I learned Hebrew. I learned all about being Jewish. I learned hundreds of prayers, and I went to Hebrew school 5 days a week for 8 years. So this was a big part of my life. I can't emphasize how important this was. All my friends were Jewish. All my relatives were Jewish. I started Hebrew school when I was 8 until I was 16, so this had a big impact on me. I remember I'd wake up in the morning, I'd pray for a half an hour in Hebrew, and then I went to school, and something unusual happened. I was about 12 years old, and as I was growing older, I began to develop a very foul mouth. I could curse very easily. I could lie to my teachers. I could lie to my parents. I was very religious in the synagogue, and these prayers meant a lot to me. And I realized it was easy to be religious. You could just act religious. And then an hour later, I'm swearing and cursing and lying, and that was easy. It was easy for me to be religious when I had to, and it was easy for me to be very irreligious, a sinner, when I wanted to. Sad. I was good at both. Sad. Then I went to a famous musical in New York City, a school called the Juilliard School of Music. I was there for 5 years and got a bachelor's and a master's in piano. And there I met 3 students who called themselves born-again Christians. Well, I never heard what that was. I had no idea what that was. But there was something about these students. One of them would be having lunch in the cafeteria at noontime and eating a sandwich. Another one took a break in practicing it. But every time I saw these students individually, they were always reading a Bible. I mean, this was not a school of religion. It was a school of music. And these were highly respected students. I mean, these were important students at Juilliard. And when the three of them got together, all they did was talk about Jesus. Jesus did this, and Jesus said this. And what did Jesus mean when he did this? Why did Jesus? They never mentioned church. I had no idea about church. They never mentioned the C word, Christianity. It was always Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus. Well, they heard I was a religious Jew, and they asked me two questions. They asked me if I ever read the New Testament. Well, I'd heard about there was such a book, but I told them, nope, not a word. I was told it was not a book for the Jews, and so you never found one in our home. I had no idea what was in it. I never saw one, read one, touched one, nothing. Zero knowledge. I mean, zero. They asked me if Jesus could be the Messiah. The Jews are waiting for this anointed one. In Hebrew, it's called Mashiach. I said, no, Jesus is not the salvation for Jewish people. But again, I was very moral. You know, I didn't want to do anything to hurt my parents. My parents almost died for me. They sacrificed for me. So I didn't want to shame them. So I never drank alcohol. To this day, I still don't know what a beer tastes like. Never been drunk. Never took drugs. Some of you may relate to this. I lived in New York City from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of the Vietnam War. That was the height of the time called the hippies. These people that said you can have all the sex you want and drugs you want, maybe you find happiness. Well, I don't know about that. But I'll tell you, if you lived in New York City when I was those 5 years, it's not what drugs you wanted, it's how much drugs you wanted. There were drugs everywhere. Everywhere. Never took it. Never had sex before marriage. But even though I was so moral on the outside, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, my friend, I'm going to tell you, I was very immoral. Immoral. You know where? Right here. Listen to me. I knew that I was not on the inside the way I could appear on the outside. I could do many, many Jewish things, but it never affected me on the inside. I was very moral, very religious, but not changed. The same foul-mouthed, dirty-minded, self-centered, egotistical person at 20, 18, 16, and 14. Nothing changed about me except I was older. Nothing changed. The same problems, the same issues. So I made a big decision. I said, well, if I want to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I'm going to read this book, the New Testament. That was a big step, because Jews don't read this book. It was a big step for me as a Jew. And I didn't want to talk to a rabbi or a priest or a minister. No one's going to tell me what I'm reading. I'm going to read this book myself. I don't want anyone to talk to me about it. When I was a student at the Juilliard, at the music school, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now that's not a lie or an exaggeration. I didn't sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I sat every day for 10 hours a day. I never left Juilliard until I completely practiced for 10 full hours. I started to read the New Testament, and my whole life came to a stop. I was shocked when I read this book. For the first time in my life since I started piano as a 9-year-old boy, I completely stopped practicing. They told me to start in this book called The Gospel of John. Now, they had given me a little pocket New Testament. They said, well, here is this book. If you want to read it, you have it. But if you read it, start in this book called The Gospel of John. Never heard of it. But I looked at it, and there it is, sure enough. So I start reading this book. And here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the light of the world. Wow. Wow. I was shocked. Here was man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the bread of life. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, no person comes to God except through me. If you have Jesus, the Son of God, you have life. If you don't have Jesus, the Son of God, you don't have life. Sam, you love God? You want to follow God? You want to obey God? You obey me. You follow me. You love me. Jesus said, you believe in God? Believe also in me. There's no difference. Well, you know, we're in a nice little church here. Let me tell you what I said to myself. Don't laugh, please. It wasn't funny. I was shocked. I said, this man is crazy. This man is crazy. Nobody ever said words like this. You know who Moses is to the Jews in the Old Testament? Moses or Abraham, the father of the Jews? They never said they were the light of the world. They never said they were the bread of life. They never said they were the only way to God. I was shocked. And I said, this is too much. This is too much. I'm going to throw away the book. And I remember the garbage can. I was going to throw away this New Testament. I'm going to go practice. And at that moment I said to myself, if Jesus Christ is who he says he is, let me repeat that again. If Jesus Christ is who he says he is. Now, you know, everybody has an opinion about Jesus. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. Why don't you let Jesus tell you who is Jesus? Jesus, who are you? You want to know who I am, Sam? I'm telling you that I am the light of the world. If he is who he says he is, I may be making the biggest mistake of my life throwing this book away. I better listen to him. And then Jesus said he came for sinners. I was not a sinner. I was very moral and very religious and spent my whole life looking good for God. I was on God's side. And yet Jesus said he came to bring forgiveness. And you notice he said? He came to change us on the inside. He called it a new heart, a new birth, a new life. A spiritual heart, a spiritual birth, a spiritual life. You know, I've played concerts in 61 different countries. I've been all through Europe. I think I've played in every country in Asia except North Korea, been to South America, been to Cuba twice. I went to Cuba when you couldn't go to Cuba. I went to Mexico. I did 28 concerts in Cuba on 2 tours, 4 weeks in Cuba. And let me tell you what I've learned. My friend, I don't care if your skin color is pink, green, blue, black, white, brown, yellow, makes no difference. No difference. I don't care if you're a Christian, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist. No difference. No difference. No difference. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Communist Party, Labor Party, Socialist. No difference. I don't care what language you speak. I don't care what culture you're from, because I'm telling you this reality. Every person in this world, and I'm now told there's 8 billion of us, and every person in this room, we are experts at hiding things. Hiding things. You know what's the first thing man did when he disobeyed God? The first thing he ever did? He hid from God. He hid. And we have figured out 1 billion ways of how to hide things from people and God. You can hide something from your wife. You can hide something from your husband. You can hide things from your parents. You can hide things from your children. You can hide things from someone at work. But let me tell you something, my friend. Nobody hides anything from this Jesus. He said that. That everything you've said in the secret is going to be shouted from the housetop. And he's going to judge the things we have done and the motive of our hearts. The motive of our heart. There's a DVD of your entire life. Outside of you and inside of you. And listen to me carefully. Even though I was so moral and so religious, I thought I was clever enough with my mind and crafty with my tongue that I thought I could hide things from people and God. And on May 21st, 1971, almost 53 years ago, May 21st, 1971, for the first time I prayed to Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you what I said. My name is Sam Rotman. And Jesus, I want you to take over my life. It's very simple. I want you to tell me what to do, and I will not tell you what to do. I told him the lies I said. I told him the immoral thoughts I told him the dirty words I said. I decided 2 things. I'm not going to hide anything from Jesus. You know something? You don't need to hide anything from Jesus, because you're not hiding anything from Jesus. decided I'd make no excuses. Now listen, do you realize you can come to Jesus Christ and you don't need to give him an excuse for anything you've ever done in your life? In fact, if you give him an excuse, you're messing it up. You're making it complicated. You don't need to give him an excuse. I finished praying. It was a long prayer. I opened up my eyes, and in a billion of a second, immediately, I knew that Jesus Christ completely changed me on the inside. I had a dirty, filthy mouth, and instantly he cleaned it and changed it. I was shocked I stopped cursing. I was shocked. And I remember a few moments later, I couldn't form a curse word with my lips if I wanted to. I had a dirty, filthy mind, and instantly he cleaned it and changed it. And the next morning I woke up and I thanked Jesus Christ and thanked Jesus Christ and thanked Jesus Christ. And I couldn't wait to get to Juilliard when the doors opened at 8 o'clock. And I was there, and I went to every practice room, and I told every Jewish friend of mine that I met the Messiah. And his name is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. I've played over 3,200 concerts. That's a lot of concerts. And all of my concerts are nothing. You know how much nothing is? Nothing. 3,200 concerts are nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life, was to give my life to Jesus Christ. Music's not the most important thing in my life. Jesus Christ is, but listen, my friend, only Jesus Christ can transform your heart. Period. Your wife can't change you. Your husband can't change you. Your parents can't change you. The church cannot change you. The government can't change you. Let me tell you something. You cannot change you. You know who the hardest person to live with is? You, yourself. But let me tell you, listen. This is the miracle in this world. This is the miracle. Being cured of cancer is like a miracle, but this is the real miracle. The real miracle in this world is that Jesus Christ actually transforms a human heart. That's my God. That's my God. And he's done it to hundreds and hundreds of millions of people over 2,000 years, and I'm one of them. Little me, I'm one. You know why I was Jewish? You know why I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. If I was born in Egypt, I'd be a Muslim. If I was born in Thailand, I'd be a Buddhist. 99% of people in the world are born into a religion. That's why they have their religion. It's not a religion, my friend. It's a person. The central person of human history. Every time you write 2023, you're acknowledging Jesus Christ is the central person of human history. Salvation is not what you will ever do for Jesus Christ. Salvation is everything that Jesus Christ has already done for you. And I play the piano for him. Jesus gave me the ears to hear the music, fingers to play the music, mind to learn the music, heart to love the music. You know that Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. I know it sounds very cute, but it's very true. And every time I give a concert in a church, a big hall in Europe, with an orchestra, college, university, he's in the front row. I sit down to play, and he always says the same thing to me. He says, Sam, I'm looking forward to hearing you play for me tonight. If I could look into your eyes, every one of you, I would tell you with every fiber of my being, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. Listen, I have known him for 51 and a half years plus. It is worth living for Jesus Christ. I'm not talking about a religion. I'm not talking about a religious system. It is worth living for Jesus Christ. Don't let anything become an excuse to keep you from the amazing life there is in Jesus Christ. I had a million excuses. My whole Jewish heritage. I had a million. Your fat past can disappoint you. Christians can disappoint you. Your issues, they're not worth it. He's worth it. And you can say like I did. Tell him your name. My name is, tell him your name. And Jesus, I want you to take over my life. And he will. And I want you to forgive me. Forgive me. And he will. And be with me and guide me and help me. And he will, and he will, and he will. Music gives me a lot of happiness, but not one note of music will ever change me. I'll play 40,000 notes in life. 40,000 notes. Not one note will change me. Jesus Christ changed me. Gave me new life. My friend, it's worth living for him. It's worth it. Last piece will be done in 5 minutes. Look at your program. The last piece you've all heard is a very famous piece called the Turkish March. Beethoven heard this piece played by some street musicians in Vienna, and he liked it. This is in his 20s before he went deaf, and he wrote it down. And 20 years later, he wrote this piece. So you'll hear this famous march. You've all heard this. This is the original version. You maybe heard it in children's play or this or that or a little cartoon or something, but this is the original. You'll hear this march, and then these 6 little variations. And each variation is just a different mood based on that march, and at the end you have the march again. So march, 6 variations march. Now notice who it's dedicated to. It's dedicated to a man named Franz Oliver. You know who Franz Oliver was? He was Beethoven's accountant. He was his tax man. He served Beethoven for 20 years and took care of all of his finances. Imagine such a relationship with this legend, that you're with him almost every day and telling him and communicating to him. I mean, I think that's remarkable. And so here's this happy piece. And he says, Franz, you've served me for 20 years. I'm going to dedicate this happy piece to you. This piece I'm writing for you, Franz Oliver. So I realized a couple of years ago that Beethoven dedicated pieces to counts and countesses, you know, aristocracy. In fact, you know the famous Moonlight Sonata? The most famous piece Beethoven wrote? That piece is dedicated to a woman called Countess Juliette Guicciardi, a very famous Italian woman that he knew, and he dedicated this piece to her. So he dedicated pieces to counts and countesses and even his accountant. I thought that was pretty clever. I was very proud of myself when I came up with that alliteration. Countesses and an accountant. So this is the last piece. We've done in 5 minutes. The Turkish March by Beethoven. just an intimate group like this, we'll be done here in 2 minutes. Anyone have a question like to ask me? My life, my music, my social security number, my... Yes.
Sam, I have a question. When you became a believer,
Yeah.
and you went home and shared with your parents,
Yeah.
how did that go, and what was the long-term effects of it? Did any of your family become believers after that?
Yeah. I get asked that all the time. How did my family respond? So I went and shared with my parents. I knew it'd be very difficult. I knew this. My father's parents died because they were Jewish. Now his son believes in this Jesus. So I shared with my parents and explained everything to them over a number of hours, just very thoughtfully, delicately, carefully. And my parents were pretty upset, especially my father. And he asked me to leave the house. And he said 3 things. You're no longer my son. I never want to hear from you again. And as far as I'm concerned, you're dead. I knew it'd be difficult. I didn't know how severe. I didn't hear from my parents for a number of years. I got married to my wife. They didn't come to the wedding. We have 3 children. I wanted them to enjoy their grandchildren, and I was not going to aggravate them, but it was too difficult. I think my children saw my parents maybe 2 or 3 times in 25 years or so, 30 years. In 1995, my father became ill. He was 89, almost 90. He was born in 1905. I wanted to visit him in the hospital, and he refused to see me. He died 4 days later. He had his funeral, a Jewish funeral, and he did not want me at the funeral. I live in Mesa, Arizona. My mother lived in Scottsdale. That's a very Jewish community in the Phoenix area, Scottsdale. And so 2 things about my mother. My mother loved classical music. I'm in classical music because of my mother. You should always listen to your mother. Even if you're 80 years old, still listen to your mother. And all of my mother's family escaped the Holocaust. My father lost his whole family that stayed. My mother's family all got out. So my mother wanted to reach out to me, but it was too difficult for my father. And with the passing of my father, I had a great relationship with my mother. I did concerts for her. She loved my wife, loved our 3 kids. I began to share with her more and more. This is 1905, 1906, 7, 8, 2005. And finally, on February the 12th, 2007, my 91-year-old mother came to faith in the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And she was changed. She was changed. February the 12th, 2007. It is worth living for Jesus Christ. It's staggering to me. And since then, she went to be with Jesus, and I spoke at her funeral. I spoke at my mother's Jewish funeral. I said, Mother, you're now in the bosom of Father Abraham. Because it says that in Matthew's gospel written to Jews, that being in doubt, a Jew is being in the bosom of Father Abraham. So I knew it'd be difficult, but Jesus said, if you don't love me more than your own father, mother, sister, and brother, this is, he transformed me, and it's worth living for him. So praise God for my mother's newness of life. Someone else, any question? Music or anything? Yes?
What composer are you going to be playing?
Now?
In Elton Rush?
Oh, I'm actually going to be playing there some Mozart and some Rachmaninoff and Debussy, French composer. Mozart, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. Yeah. Yes?
Why did the Archduke not take Beethoven with him?
Why?
Why did the Archduke not take Beethoven with him?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Why did the Archduke? I think probably he wasn't allowed to. I think that, I'm just saying, I think that maybe for security reasons, they didn't want to bring Beethoven along with him. Then if he brought him, who else could, the idea was, if the emperor is leaving and everything, and he takes a non-family member, well, then why didn't he take 20 other people? Why didn't he take me? I don't know, The reason, the other thing is that I don't know if Beethoven had obligations in Vienna. He had concerts and stuff. He was very popular, very famous. Although at this point he had stopped performing, so that's good to, number 26, he was not performing anymore. He couldn't perform because he couldn't hear the music. But there were other concerts going on and stuff. His music kept playing and stuff. Until ultimately there was a bombarding of Vienna through Napoleon. He eventually made it to Vienna, and he didn't take Vienna in that sense. So, I've never been asked that question, by the way, but I just suspect that being a non-family member, and if he did this for him, you know, then it would, you know. And again, I never read anything that Beethoven asked to be taken. I've read many documents about their relationship, the Archduke, and about this time when he left and things in writing of this piece. I never read anything that he turned down Beethoven's request. I never read anything like that. So if Beethoven did ask him, it's not documented, you know. But I suspect it's for all those reasons, you know, non-member, concerts, obligations, and so he was leaving, but we're staying, you know, in that sense. Yes,
Could you estimate how many pieces you have memorized?
1,100. Yeah, you don't have to, I know, yeah. Look what it did to me, you know. I learned 1,100 pieces.
How many
Yeah.
hours of practice? do you
Oh,
think?
10 hours a day for 20 years. I practiced.
Still 10
it.
hours?
No, I still now practice 7 hours. 7. Just,
Cut that.
I'm 72. If I practice 10 hours, I don't feel so good the next day. I mean, because I practice where I play very intensely. So I had lunch today, and then afterwards I came here and practiced, and then, you know, had to make some phone calls and stuff, and then our friend came here, and I was practicing a little bit, and for a concert I have in 3 months on a Beethoven piece with an orchestra and stuff. So, yeah, just because you're a Christian, it doesn't mean you play the piano well. You have to practice. There was a famous pianist named Arthur Rubinstein. I don't know if you know the name. Yeah. He was legendary. I heard him play maybe a dozen times. I mean, he was one of the greatest pianists of the 20th century. And he said if he doesn't practice for 1 day, he notices it. And if he doesn't practice for 2 days, his wife notices it. And if he doesn't practice for 3 days, the world notices it. In a concert, you know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, the best advice to give, I know this young lady's a piano, they asked me, what can you tell people who are studying piano? Practice every day. Because if you miss a day, you've lost what you did the day before. So even if it's 10 minutes, but still practice every day. Don't miss a day. And listen to your teacher. Listen. Your teacher says, work on this, work on this. Don't just play the piece over and over and over and over and over. And you know, yeah. So, yeah. During COVID is where I did a lot of practicing. I had 54 concerts, you know, and there was this one piece, it's a 40-minute piece by a composer named Maurice Ravel, a famous composer. If, you know, you have to know classical music. It's a tremendous piece. And I worked on it. I mean, I was practicing almost 10 hours a day, really, because I had no concerts. And I learned this piece. My wife was shocked that I learned, at 70 years old, that I learned this. I mean, it's a massive piece. Probably 30,000 notes in this one piece. And I learned it and memorized it. Yeah. Le Tombeau de Couperin. I mean, it's a monumentally great piece. So I'm just saying, you know, I learned a lot of new music during COVID. Oh, yes, sir.
My eyesight isn't what it used to be, but do you play with your eyes closed?
I play, well, I mean, my eyes are closed a lot, don't I?
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, that's not for show. I mean, I'm not doing
No,
that.
I know, but
Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm trying to, look, I mean, when I'm playing a piece, I'm trying to feel the emotion of the piece, like this is noble, or this is tragic, or this is happy, or this is sad. Or I'm trying to envision Beethoven waving to his friend and walking in the park with his hand like this and stopping, and only you hear him alone, and then seeing his friend. So to help me, I really, you know, you focus. If you all stood up and walked out, I wouldn't notice. I wouldn't notice. I'd hear maybe something. You know, people say, oh, I'm sorry about my baby, they were crying. I didn't hear any baby crying. So I try to really, you have to really concentrate to play 40,000 notes, you know. So I really concentrate. So it helps me concentrate by closing my eyes, you know. And I'm not doing that because, oh, now close your eyes. I mean, it's just a reflex.
well, I closed mine while you were playing.
That's good.
And sometimes you appreciate it more.
Oh yeah, many times that's why. You close your eyes to, you can just hear the sound and have the music wash over you, and you feel the effect of the power of the music, yeah. But I know that I know, you know, I know people say I stick my tongue out and I do this and that. And so I once saw myself on a PBS, I gave a concert on PBS nationally, and I was looking at it, and to be honest with you, I got a little grossed out looking at myself. At one point turn off the black and white. I don't want to. I mean, it was not the whole thing, but there were moments that looked like I was in pain or something. Oh, I don't want to see this. Oh my goodness. You know how sometimes in the old TVs you could turn off the thing, you know, like black, you know, make it pitch black and you turn it back up. And, I mean, this was many years ago. But I think this was like in the mid-'80s or so, 40 years ago almost. But I said, oh man, do I look like that, really? My wife says, yep, you look that bad. Well, only she can say that. Yeah, that's how you look. Tongue sticking out, closed eyes, contorted. One guy once asked me after a concert, I've never had this, but one guy once asked me at a concert if I had this disease called something with a tick. Like, have you heard of this disease? It's some sort of something tick, like there's an uncontrolled spasm. No, there's a real name that has the word tick in it, something tick, like Veritic or something. And I said, no, and he says, well, you sure look like you have it. I thought, oh man, should I go see a doctor or what should I do?
Brutally honest.
Yeah, he's really out. Yes, sir.
Well, I just mention on what he says too, but also like in Seattle, when I talked to you earlier.
Yeah.
In Seattle, I was a photographer for all the big music, and
Yes,
music in Seattle is humongous.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. If you want to be a pro, and I shot a lot of professional artists,
Yeah.
you have to practice 10 to 12 hours a day minimum,
Yeah.
and that's what they all did.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, are they looking at their hands when they're strumming the guitars? Or
Yeah,
no,
yeah, not really.
It's like, to me, it would be like trying to type and look at the keys. If I look at the key, I can't type.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't type.
Yeah. Analysis produces paralysis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Then last one.
I just want to let you know I enjoyed your music, and it actually brought me back to over 40 years ago when I was in high school ballet. I danced to a lot of Beethoven.
Oh, you did? Oh, great.
in
Brings back the
ballet.
memories of the music
I
to your.
took 12 years of ballet, but
Uh-huh.
I had with one teacher between 6th and 12th grade that, you know, did a lot of Beethoven.
Right,
and
right.
It
Oh,
brought me
good.
back. I was visualizing the steps.
Yeah, oh,
to
good.
music, you know, what I would do to the music.
Well, you should have come up and.
Can you see my hand here protecting?
I was visualizing what I would do to
That's why
that
you didn't
song,
go
this
That's why I
part,
didn't go over.
and thinking what we did, and that's what we did. We
Yeah,
listened to
yeah,
music, and you felt it. You felt it.
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's true. And of course, with ballet, you have your career ends when you're 40, 50. You can't do it when
Yeah.
you're 60 or 70.
I just did it in high school, you know,
Oh, I see.
high school, but at least it was fun.
I have some recordings in the back, the table here. One is a DVD of my whole testimony, my story. Everything you heard here, I speak. You watch it on TV. It's a documentary. I play on that as well. And then there's 3 recordings. One is all Beethoven, my favorite recording. It has the whole Moonlight Sonata, the most famous piece he wrote, the whole thing. 5 works by Beethoven. Another recording is Debussy, the French composer, Clair de Lune, you know. The Debussy recording is droplets of sound. All your stress will go out of you. Your wife will be a puddle of water in the living room. You'll be a puddle. And then there's a recording of Russian music. And you know what happens when you listen to, when you get the French music, all the stress goes out of you. You know what happens when you listen to Russian music? All the stress goes back in. It's very powerful, very emotional. I mean, it's some of my favorite music, because I play a lot of Russian music because I'm Slavic. My parents were both born in Eastern Europe, and we have roots to Russia. So I love Russian music. It's very powerful. So they're each $15, each recording, and DVD. There's no tax. The autograph is free. And then I like to share, very briefly, many years ago I gave a concert in Seattle. And there was a lady there who owns a publishing company, a Christian publishing company. And she publishes books of the Bible, not the whole Bible, individual books. And she heard me play, and she asked me, could she publish the Gospel of John, that's the book that I read that brought me to the Lord, and publish my testimony in it. And so she followed me around for about 4 or 5 concerts, wrote it down, taped all my testimony, and got me literally a word by word. I mean, it's absolutely 1,000% accurate of what I shared tonight. And it's there in the back, and it's free. She gives these books to me free, and I offer them free. And she just asked if you take one, it's because maybe you could share this with someone who needs to read this. So don't take 10 books that just have on your shelf. Take one book if you want to keep it. If you know somebody who wants it. So the books are there in the back. The CDs are, there's a fee, $15, but the autograph is free. And actually, you'll be very interested to know this. 20 plus years ago, I gave a concert in Green Valley. And that night in Green Valley, I said, tonight, the autograph is $15 and the CD is free. That's true. And a man came up to me afterward and said, I like a CD with no autograph. Green Valley is very close to me. I have a special affection of sourness. No. So, tonight the autograph is free. You don't have to pay for it, but you know. Well, brother, you're going to come up and say something? Yeah, okay, go ahead. And then I'll be in the back. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry I went a little bit late on a school night or so, but I hope it inspires you, and thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. Go ahead.
Okay,